Oh, hey guys, welcome to week 10. I'm moving the table because for the last 9 weeks, this has been sitting this way and it's been almost impossible to get to certain crucial areas, which we'll get to, which is the grounds. So I'm in the process of shimmying the table back and forth so that I can flip it about so that I can now get started on the grounds for week 10. But I thought I'd quickly stop here for a second because I've never actually been able to walk completely around the castle and just take my time, especially coming over from this angle over here, which is kind of cool to see the bell towers from this side because I've never seen it. I've always had to put my head against the wall and I can get within about a foot of it. But there we are. I'll come back around the other side. You can see what that's looking like over here. It's not fallen apart as I've moved the table. However, I will show you something. It's very funny. The table is sagging in the middle. That's how heavy this MOC is. The table is sagging. Sweet, so we moved the table. So now we're able to work on this side in plenty of freedom. I've moved the table as much as I can towards the wall. Just left a little gap in case I need to get around this side. But for the next few weeks, everything's gonna be focused here and on the back side of the castle. But I won't spoil too much of what my future plans are. In short, there is a lot of sort of modifying that will need to be done in the coming weeks. We've got the base buildings pretty much done, but I was thinking earlier this week that when it comes to interiors, I don't just want to go half par. I've already experimented with the long gallery and I like how that turned out. And I really want to do that for the rest of the castle. So I want to almost modularize every building that I can, and the ones that I can't, I'm going to make pockets in the walls that can come off because I want to have full interiors for this entire castle. And it's going to take a lot longer to get done, but I mean, Hogwarts will just look so much cooler if you can lift off walls and take off roofs and just see inside and be like, oh, that's sweet. Because right now it's just a bunch of hollow buildings. I mean, there's nothing in this at all. But before I get too distracted, just talking about stuff, it's kind of cool to see it from this angle because we've always been against the wall. So you've not really been able to step back and be like, oh, right, so that's what Hogwarts looks like from the back. It also makes you realize because you're able to step back, the flaws that you never noticed because you weren't able to see the full picture. But I'll start over here really quickly. So we've got the Great Hall and what we talked about doing down here in the dungeons. I think that looks pretty cool. And then we've got this area here, which stands out to me as between this pretty big astronomy tower and this whole section of the dungeons, which has got this little piddly bit in the middle. Now that's actually there, but I'm going to try to figure out a way to do something interesting with it because it is just water at the end of the day, but maybe we can figure out a cool scene to put there. This is what the inside of the grand staircase tower is looking like. This back area of the quad courtyard. We've got this side of the viaduct entrance, which is a singular door, but I'm hoping that I can make this wall removable in some way. Got some looks down here into the back of the central tower. Coming around, we have the courtyard, which is still pretty sizable. I mean, we've got this space to work with. And then, of course, now we have the castle grounds. Right, guys, so obviously this screenshot was taken to focus on the central tower from many weeks ago, but there is a bit of the grounds out there, which I'll just focus on for right now. It gives us enough of a view of what we're working on. So the thing with the interior of the castle grounds, as in not just exterior terrain, but anything that belongs to the castle, is the grounds are quite manicured and very pristine and very nice. There's no random weathering and destroyed anything really. So it's going to be very neat. So we've got, as you can see, a circular sort of courtyard, if you will, with what is a fountain right there in the middle. So that'll be quite fun to make. And then there is a path leading out. And this is a main feature that I want to include, is this sort of exterior wall to the castle. And there's a small building that marks the entrance to the castle grounds. And then over here to the left is just really open greens, and there's the beast class, and there is what's supposed to be Hagrid's hut, but you know, this is set like 200 years prior. The Quidditch grounds are actually outside of the castle grounds, but we might see how space is looking here. My thinking is, based on how the bell tower is situated, if I do a sundial courtyard right here with a fountain in the middle. That's taken up from about here to here. So you've only got about a base plate to work with on the left. And I don't think that's enough space to try to include some of the Quidditch for now. So what I'm going to try to do is make the focus Hagrid's hut and maybe making a little area where they have their first flying lesson or something. Because of course I just didn't realize I was completely unfocused. I don't know how long that's been. The main focus for me is trying to do that castle wall. And we'll just see how much space we're encroaching upon and what we're left with. And then we'll decide how to go from there. Look at this, the lengths I go to. There was a singular 8x8 green plate right here in front of the doorway. And this was obviously before I'd even built the bell towers, knew what they looked like at all. But I don't know why that was there. So I had to rip up like the entire top half of the bell tower and try to rip this off just so that I can replace it with a dark tan so that I can do a path. Here's a quick overview of my thinking of what we would do with the castle grounds over here. Admittedly, I have a lot less space than I anticipated, and it's probably because I just didn't realize how big certain things was. In my mind, Hagrid's hut was about half that size, because I had this huge grand vision of what I was going to do with this. I mean, I have a whole list here of everything that I want to put in the castle, interiors, scenes, all of that. I'll just walk you through what my dream vision for this area was. I was going to have a really nice area where I could have a sliver of the Quidditch pitch, the area for Hagrid's hut. I was going to have a nice section of the Forbidden Forest, and I was even going to try to put that bit from the Triwizard Tournament, the dragon scene, and make the stands and that little rocky outcropping arena thing. I was going to do all of that. And then I started laying things out, and I was like, oh, I do not have that space. So that's the problem with building Hogwarts, is you have such grand visions, although it takes up a lot more space than you think. And to be fair, this is a sizable Hogwarts, but I'm sorry. You and I have both seen Hogwarts online that are like absolutely gigantic. So I don't know how they're faring with anything. But in any case, back to how I'm faring. I've laid this out very quickly. This is what I envision for that sort of circular courtyard area. It is a lot bigger, but because I'm limited on space, I don't want to dominate the whole area with just a little fountain. So we'll work with what we have here, and we'll just take inspiration from it, if you will. This is a basic outline of the outer wall. The main idea is I don't want to just do rectilinear outlines. I want to add some curve to it. So I'm just using hinge plates here to angle some of the walls. And the idea is it just goes all the way around and it curves around to the front. Now, normally, if you guys have seen pictures of Hogwarts Legacy and such, in fact, I've got it there. I'll just get closer if I have to get around all that. So right there is what the greenhouses look like in Hogwarts Legacy, and those look amazing. However, I just don't have any transparent pieces, let alone the amount to do that. So we're using the ones from the Astronomy Tower set, and I happened to get two of them because one of them was on clearance sale at some point. And I really like the way those look, so I might modify them slightly, but that's what we're using as the greenhouses. So my wall is just going to curve around. Instead of having a really weird glass building, I'm just going to have this area here in front of the long gallery dedicated to the greenhouses and herbology and such. And then at this point right here where there's a level change, I'm just going to pitch the wall right into this building right here. And that's fine with me. And I was just experimenting if I could angle it using hinges or if I could use the wedge plates there. And then this is where the main entrance would go. Now, in terms of what goes on outside here, right here, I'm planning on putting a little stream, which could be fun. It's just to add a little bit of depth to this depth and connect it over there to that water area, because it is the Black Lake right in front here and around that side. And then at this point, there's a river that cuts across and it goes through the Forbidden Forest in the game, at least. So that's something I want to include. And I'll just intersperse it with a few trees and such. And then over on this side, as much as I can, I want to heavily forest it. Although that being said, it's not that much space, so I could probably squeeze about 3, potentially 4 trees in this area. And then I'm also going to try to raise the terrain slightly so that there's a little bit of depth here. So it's at its lowest point about right here, and then it steadily gets up to maybe about 6 bricks or so up here. We'll see how that turns out. And then Hagrid's hut, of course, over here, and we'll do a nice snaking path up to him. So that's my outline. I'm now going to go in and try to start with a path and work my way outwards, and I'm just going to detail as I like and see how it turns out. And I think however I deal with this area is going to start to inform how this area starts to form over here. So let's get to that, guys. So this is sort of the technique that I'm going with when it comes to building the paths and gradually moving between layers of the terrain. For right now, I've just been doing this corner over here using wedges. And I started over here by first laying down some green plates and using these curved dark tan plates to mark out this little courtyard area because I don't have any in green. So I had to put the dark tan on top of the green. And then slowly working my way up to the front door there and making another path over here, which is a little bit more interesting, leading up to what will eventually be the greenhouses over there. And then in between, I've been doing some green wedges. The only problem is that's really the extent of all the green wedges I have. So anything else, I'm going to have to get a little bit more creative with what I do. I'm taking a little bit of a break because all that pressing down on plates has left an imprint on my hand. It's a little bit sore. But in any case, this is the general aesthetic that we're going with. When I think it comes to the Forbidden Forest, obviously that needs to look aesthetically different from the green and dark tan over here. So naturally I would say, oh, I fade it to reddish brown over here, but I think then the trees and anything might get a little bit lost. I've never been a fan of just completely dark brown terrain for a forest. So I might actually experiment with doing primarily dark tan interspersed with brown to show some dirt coming through. But I think the dark tan would look a lot better, especially in contrast with the brown from the tree trunks and all of that. But this is where we are so far. I'm gonna work my way this way and then start figuring out how I want to lay out a river over here. So the design that I've come up with at the moment is that the stream that would come from the Black Lake actually comes right into the Forbidden Forest, and then that's the lake or the pond that's at the end of the Prisoner of Azkaban where Harry's shooting the Dementors with Patronus. So I think that's just a cool nod that I can make that connection, and then it makes sense because how else does the water get into the middle of the forest? It has to come through a stream, and there's the stream, so boom. We're kind of going with the same sort of techniques of wedge plates as we've been doing all around through there, but hopefully once that's all done, it will tie together. What I've been trying to do is experiment very basically with different colors underneath the water. So these are just immediately on the base plate under the tiles. These have got sand blue, which I don't know where I got those, but I had a few of them. And then this is a, whatever color that is, let's call it light blue 16 by 16 plate under there. Now the transition there is obviously a bit harsh, so I'll have to fix that, but I do like how it's not all the same color because it gives it a little bit more character like that. And I have this bag because this is from my Erebor MOC from about 5 or 6 years ago. And I built a huge river across the middle of that one, so that's all the pieces I have from there. I have a ton left over, but obviously not enough to actually tile off that area. But now that I have started using tiles over here, I'm starting to think that interspersing some tiles, maybe just around the perimeter of the rock work over there, will help to tie in that section with this section as well. So that'll be a later decision, but if I have enough left over, I'd like to try that. I've somewhat relocated the Hagrid's hut. It used to be facing this way, and now I've turned it that way just because when it was facing this way, it ended about right there. So it meant the forest could only be about this big. But by pushing it back there, I can encroach the forest as close as possible to his front door. And then that looks all right because Hagrid lived on the edge of the forest anyway. So we've got our first ever minifigure showing in the MOC, I believe. We've got Harry shooting his Patronus. The main reason I want to kind of get this going is because I want to use the minifigures and I want to dress this place up and really bring some life to it. But got to finish the terrain first, and this is quite stickly work because unlike the castle where I can kind of just use a reference, I am just messing about right now and just seeing what I come up with. But we're getting there. So sticking on with the idea of just messing about and seeing what I come up with, here's what we've got so far. I know you guys can see that this looks very angular and unfinished, but the purpose of leaving that as it is for the moment is because this is where the outer wall of the castle grounds will go. So I wanted to leave it as flat as possible so that I could build it with relative ease, and then I would add the additional detail that's needed after the wall is complete. But I think we can all agree that the little stream looks really nice. In fact, I would almost argue that the coloring of just the blue base plate looks a lot better than any of these two colors. But I'll leave that for you guys to decide down in the comments. It shouldn't be too difficult to switch those out if necessary, but yeah, I am liking how that's looking right over there. What I've got going on over here is the courtyard thing right in the middle is the lowest point of the castle grounds, and I'm kind of drawing an imaginary circle around it and going up. So that's what we had in the last clip over there, and I've just sort of continued this around, path coming up. This is where the gateway would be, and I'm thinking of doing a little bridge just over here. That's why I've done the stream across there. I just thought it would add a little bit more detail. And then at this point, I'm still figuring out how I'm going to do the forest, because I want to make sure that you can see this area of Hagrid's hut, but I want to make the forest as big as possible over here. There's also the question of whether or not the wall of the castle grounds should continue all the way over there, because funny enough, in the game it kind of just ends about halfway up, as if you were trying to invade the castle. You couldn't just like go around the wall. But maybe that would be crazy, because no one would ever invade from the back. Any case, I think it's just there for appearance rather than actual feasibility. I've got this really cool piece here, which is, I believe, a 10 by 20 brick. That's so cool. I've got another one under here. You can't see it anymore. But I've been using a few of those just to make my life of the castle grounds a little bit easier. In any case, I just realized I've been ranting for the last little bit. We are going to try to continue doing this area over here, and we'll see how we get on. So I'm going to pretend like it hasn't been a few days since the last clip, and I've actually gotten a lot of work done. But that's not exactly to be the case, and I do apologize. I got distracted by a few things non-LEGO related. In any case, working on this area over here, the main idea that I'm trying to get across is that there's an organic boundary between the forest and the castle grounds. I don't want it to just all of a sudden turn from green to dark tan and there's suddenly a bunch of trees. So we're trying to blend it a little bit. The terrain is obviously the first step, but then you layer on things like foliage and trees and people and such, and we'll start to get that message across. Hagrid's hut, this is a, doesn't look like I did much to it, which in fact I didn't really touch the set. What I have done though is I've just lifted it up a bit off the main base plates and put it against this wall, and the reason being is, if I can get it hooked back up, the reason being is by lifting it up slightly, I can have some terrain and general rock work go into the hut itself and make it feel a little bit more integrated with the MOC, because it's quite hard to deal with an angle if you're just using plates. But that's what we've got so far. And then right here, I'm going to attempt to just make a little path going that way, as if the forest continues in that direction. The path out to Hagrid's hut is very simple, just from the main courtyard. It just curves around, simple as that. I've done a little bit of experimenting right here, just in concept. Obviously, this is very piddly, of transitioning between this and this color of plate. You can see the transition over here works quite well, because it looks like the water is falling down, and that's why it gets darker. But here it's much more pronounced, the break. So I'm going to have to figure out a more pronounced way of covering that transition. That's okay. And then lastly, apart from, finishing up that area over there, what I'm going to do is continue the basic rock work over here, just across the entire front of the castle, until we get to that point over there, so that we can finally have a finished rock wall. So I've gone ahead and done a little bit of work on the terrain over here, just adding a bit of rock work and finishing off the plates for the sort of base layer of the terrain, at least. So I've got that done. I have built the terrain up to Hagrid's hut so that there's not any weird gaps like there was in the last clip. And then I have thrown in that little path that I was talking about right there. So we've got the base layer of all the terrain pretty much done, which is good. I've done a little bit more experimenting here, just varying the color, that's dark tan and sand green, of blending between the two base colors under the water, seeing how that turns out. I'm not a huge fan of what it's looking like right now, but I'm sure it will come to me as we continue building. And then we've done a lot of work here, finishing up all this rock wall and just adding a little bit of green plates to add some variety so it's not just one straight line down the edge. But that is pretty much all that we are able to get done this week. Next week, we're going to pick up right where we left off here, and we're going to finish, or we're going to start the wall that I've been talking about in this week's episode. We're going to start over there and work our way this way so that we can kind of dictate how this area is going to look. We've got to make this impressive gate that in some way has to mirror the tall spires and such that you see in this building. It looks very similar. If you were to take that building right there and then shrink it, that's what this one will hopefully look like right here. Planning to do a little bridge perhaps. We're gonna get some trees going in. We've got a lot of work to do, but thank you all so much for watching, guys. That was week 10 of building Hogwarts. I'll see you all in week 11.